This is an entire college course without all the fluff and boring information. I just give you the interesting parts and the stuff you need to know. In Psych 3991, there are 4 modules. Each module is further broken up into topics. Module 1 contains 4, Module 2, 6, and another 6, totaling 22 different topics. Let's begin. First, we'll take a broad approach in reviewing the general study of psychology, as well as its research methods and research issues. Then, the focus narrows to the psychology of human resilience, where we will look closely at the work of Emmy Warner, whose groundbreaking study, Children of the Garden Island, led the way in studies of human resilience. Topic 1, Introduction to Human Resilience in Psychology. We begin by trying to figure out what resilience is. I defined it as in the face of resistance, one improves instead of weakens. Resilience is more popularly defined as the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity. Historically, human strength and resilience have not been studied. Instead, the proposed lack of it, resulting in human shortfalls and psychopathology, was studied by none other than Freud, who seems to have done nearly everything else in the field of psychology. Freud made connections between psychological disorders in adults to early psychological traumas. However, Freud didn't study those that endured these psychological traumas and instead came out relatively unscathed and mentally healthy. As this psychological research has evolved, we've moved away from deficits that increase the risk of adverse outcomes to strengths that protect against the development of these same outcomes, like resilience. This shift in paradigm is considered more positive psychology, and this positive psychology is researched in a holistic manner where the whole of the individual is considered not just a single part. That's taking into account genetic or biological factors, as well as all the factors that can't be associated with the child's environment. Yuri Bronfenbrenner introduced his bioecological model, which places the developing child in the middle of a sphere of influence of increasing relevance to that child's life. For example, the child's parents are in the first sphere, while a child's culture is a few spheres outside, ranking a child's family more immediate of a factor to its resilience than their culture. This model is the framework used to organize this very course, where Module 2 takes us through resilience in the individual and Modules 3 and 4 take us through resilience in the family and resilience in community, respectively. Since we plan to look at many psychological studies throughout the course, we first need to define terms and clarify some concepts. There are 3 main types of research in psychology: causal or experimental research, descriptive research, and relational or correlation research. Experimental research seeks to find cause, or how A affects B. Correlation research tries to find correlation, be it positive or negative, between A and B. And descriptive research tries to define and find correlations in the natural world through surveys or case studies. So let's say I'm a student and I'm interested in the relationship between listening to music and studying. I first go out and do descriptive research, where I could do surveys to see how popular listening to music while studying is and what type of music people listen to while they study. Then I perform a correlation study where I try to find out if listening to music while studying has a positive effect on GPA or a negative effect. We've all heard it. Correlation does not equal causation. Although let's say there is correlation between listening to music and GPA, we can't know if either of them are caused of each other. To find the cause, we would need to do an experimental study, which sets music listening and test scores as variables and tests to see if students that study while playing music outperform students that study while not playing music. Music here being the independent variable that is manipulated, meaning if the music is on or off, and test scores being the dependent variable, which is the variable that is being measured. If the students who listen to music do outperform the students that didn't, you can then say there's a causal relationship between the 2 variables, music and test scores. That is experimental research. The strengths in correlation studies are that they allow phenomena to be observed that can't be studied in a traditional research design, such as the correlation between drug use during pregnancy and disadvantages in the offspring. You can't put a bunch of expecting moms on drugs and see how messed up the kids are. Its weaknesses are, of course, causation, where, for example, it's true that ice cream sales and crime rates are extremely closely correlated, but of course they aren't the cause of one another. I like ice cream just as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to do a murder over it. A third variable, hot temperatures, affects them both separately. The strength of experimental studies are you can prove or disprove causation, where knowing that ice cream sales don't cause crime rates to increase, we don't need to worry about selling ice cream. On the other hand, if we knew that ice cream sales did increase crime rate, we now need to get those goddamn ice cream trucks off the streets for the children. For this course, I will also help to compare and contrast a theory and a hypothesis. I like to think of a theory as big and a hypothesis as small, because to have a theory you must have many hypotheses prove correct again and again through studies. Therefore, a theory is a principle that is researched and proven many times that explains some aspect of the natural world, like gravity. Whereas a hypothesis would be looking at an apple dangling from a tree and stating, I think when that apple finally snaps off, it will fall to the ground. A hypothesis is a testable prediction, always pointing at what you expect to happen in the study you're about to perform. There are also two types of time dimensions when talking about research methods in psychology: cross-sectional research and longitudinal research. Cross-section is like our research study, where our students study while listening to music for, let's say, an hour. Then they take a test while another group of students study and take that same test with no music to see if listening to music helps you study or not. This is considered cross-sectional research because everything takes place at a single point in time. All tests, measures, or variables are given to the participants on one occasion. Longitudinal research is like studying the effects of aging, where data is collected at the beginning of the study and then will be gathered again and again over days, weeks, months, or even years. The difference between reliability and validity. Let's try to determine whether this new IQ test we've given a student is reliable. You look at their scores from 3 different tests taken at different times under the same constraints, and they scored 120, 101, and 135. Since the test seems to be unable to produce a consistent result, and it's impossible for a student's IQ to change by a wide degree of 34 points, comparing their lowest IQ to their highest, this is an example of a test with low reliability. The results are inconsistent. Let's say we take those same IQ tests, and the scores happen to be similar, 120, 121, and 118. This means the IQ test is reliable and valid, right? Well, you look down at the test being administered and you realize all the questions are asking you to fill in the blank to Taylor Swift lyrics. You realize this IQ test probably isn't actually testing IQ. This means the test has low validity. The importance of good reliability and validity when conducting research is researchers need to interpret the results of their studies accurately. If a measurement is unreliable, it becomes challenging to determine whether observed differences are due to actual difference in the construct being measured or random error. We now move into mediator variables. Let's say our predictor variable is exposure to images of thin fashion models. Our mediator variable could then be body dissatisfaction, with our outcome variable being dieting behavior. Our mediator variable sits in the middle, connecting a predictor variable to an outcome variable. We get more clarity when we answer a question. A researcher finds that a particular weight loss program helps overweight men lose weight, but not overweight women. Identify the risk variable, the moderator variable, and the outcome variable. The risk variable in the study is being overweight, acting as a factor associated with a higher likelihood of a particular outcome. The moderating variable is the gender of the participants, influencing the strength and direction of the relationship between the weight loss program, the independent variable, and the amount of weight loss, outcome variable. The researcher found that the program is effective for overweight men but not for overweight women, indicating a moderating effect by gender. Therefore, the weight loss program's success is contingent upon the moderating variable, demonstrating a differential impact based on the participant's gender, while the risk variable is the initial overweight status. Reading and analyzing research reports are an important part of this course. Most psychology research is organized in APA format. The benefit of all research reports having the same layout is it makes it easy to move laterally from article to article and find information in the same place. First presented is an abstract, which conveys without technical jargon what the study was about, how it was conducted, and what the findings were, and what the implications of the findings are. The introduction presents a preview of the literature and outlines the purpose of the study and the researcher's hypotheses. The methods section describes the participant's sample, age, ethnicity, the materials used, a paper, pencil, questionnaire, and the procedure, how the study was conducted. The results section outlines the statistical findings of the study, and the discussion section explains the results and relates the findings to the previous literature. In the discussion sections, the limitations of the study are usually addressed, as are ideas for future research. Finally, the references section documents the literature sources used, following APA format. Reading these scholarly articles will be an important part in this course. As we finish off our first module, we are introduced to our first study done by Emmy Warner called The Children of the Garden Island. Children of the Garden Island pioneered the study of resilience to adverse outcomes. Werner's study continued for nearly 34 years, and she sought to explain why some individuals were more resilient than others. Our study takes place in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai, where mothers are being told about a new study undertaken by the Kauai Department of Health. Many pregnant women join the study, beginnings with interviews of the women at each trimester of pregnancy, making sure to note any exposures to physical or emotional trauma. Physicians monitored if there were any complications during the prenatal period, labor, delivery, and the neonatal period. Social workers also interviewed the mothers in the postpartum period and when the children were 1 and 10 years old. Home visits were also taken note of to observe the interactions between mothers and children. Pediatricians and psychologists independently examined the children at 2 and 10 years of age, assessing their physical, social, and intellectual development, noting any handicaps or behavioral problems. Teachers also evaluated the children's academic progress and their behavior in the classroom. These are the noteworthy facts about the study. The study adopted a longitudinal approach, tracking the development of children over an extended period. This approach allows researchers to observe how resilience manifests over time and how it interacts with various developmental milestones. The research also involved a multidisciplinary team comprising physicians, social workers, psychologists, and educators. This diverse expertise ensured a holistic understanding of the factors influencing child development and resilience. Beyond data collection, the study prioritized community engagement and collaboration. Local healthcare providers, educators, and community leaders were involved in designing the study and interpreting its findings, ensuring relevance and cultural sensitivity. Given the unique cultural context of Hawaii and the island of Kauai, the study took into account cultural factors that might impact resilience and child development. This included traditions, values, and social support structures within the community. Recognizing the potential impact of trauma on child development, the study adopted a trauma-informed approach to data collection and analysis. This involves sensitively assessing and addressing any exposure to physical or emotional trauma experienced by the mothers and children. In addition to individual-level factors, the study explored environmental influences on resilience, such as access to healthcare, socioeconomic status, and community resources. Understanding these broader contextual factors is crucial for developing effective interventions. Home visits and observations of parent-child interactions provided insights into the quality of caregiver and attachment relationships, which are known to influence resilience and socio-emotional development. Involving teachers in evaluating academic progress and classroom behavior provided a comprehensive view of children's functioning across different settings. This collaboration between researchers and educators strengthens the applicability of findings to educational practices. Now, this is what this groundbreaking study found. The study identifies various protective factors that contribute to resilience in children, such as strong parent-child attachment, supportive community networks, access to quality healthcare, and adaptive coping strategies. Understanding these factors can inform interventions aimed at promoting resilience in at-risk populations. Early identification of risk factors such as maternal trauma or socioeconomic disadvantage allows for targeted interventions during pregnancy and early childhood. By addressing these factors proactively, researchers aim to mitigate their impact on child development and enhanced resilience. Longitudinal data analysis reveals distinct developmental trajectories among children, with some exhibiting resilient outcomes despite early adversity, while others may struggle with persistent challenges. Identifying these trajectories helps tailor interventions to meet the specific needs of different groups. The study also explores the interplay between genetic predispositions and environmental influences on resilience. While genetic factors may contribute to individual differences in resilience, environmental factors such as supportive relationships and access to resources can modulate genetic vulnerability. Findings from teacher evaluations shed light on the impact of early experiences on academic performance and classroom behavior. Understanding how resilience influences educational outcomes can inform educational policies and practices aimed at supporting vulnerable students. Beyond individual-level factors, the study examines the role of community-level resilience in buffering against adverse outcomes. Strong social networks, cultural traditions, and community cohesion emerge as key protective factors that promote resilience at the collective level. By following children into adolescence and beyond, the study assesses the long-term effects of early experiences on resilience and well-being. Insights into transgenerational patterns of resilience can inform strategies of breaking the cycle of intergenerational disadvantage. Cultural variability. The study highlights the importance of considering cultural variability in resilience research. Cultural norms, values, and practices shape individuals' responses to adversity and influence the effectiveness of interventions. Culturally sensitive approaches are essential for promoting resilience across diverse populations. That's the end of Module 1. In this module, we move from terminology, research methods, and other boring shit. We now explore the individual factors like personality traits and situational interpretations that increase resiliencies in people facing or at risk for adversity. Adversity can take many forms: poverty, violence, living with a parent with a mental disorder. It's intriguing to ask the question, why do some individuals from similar adverse backgrounds thrive while others don't? The basis of the study of resilience asks the question, can we increase the protective factors in at-risk communities, hereby giving them a better chance at surmounting their adverse outcomes? Designing interventions that promote resilience is difficult. We can't ask people to change their entire personalities, but you can create interventions that tap into factors amenable to change, like improving one's body image or improving interaction strategies. Topic 1. Individual temperament and resilience. Among the initial research into resilience, an individual's temperament is found to have significant influence on how others react to and interact with that individual. It was found that an easygoing temperament was correlated to increased resilience in the face of adversity. A happier child may elicit more positive responses from his or her caregiver and friends. If we imagine this child compared to another child born to a similar single mother with low socioeconomic status, a child with a bad temperament might be seen as another burden on the mother, along with many other burdens associated with being a single parent living in poverty. Meanwhile, a similar mother whose child has an easygoing temperament may lift her spirits and bring joy to her life, eliciting a positive response. In it, the bioecological model that we introduced in Module 1 is relevant to the author's research, where temperament is introduced as a sphere of influence. Temperament is broken down into two broad components of emotionality, either positive or negative, which positive emotionality refers to emotions like smiling and laughing, while negative emotionality refers to emotions like fear and frustration. Starting with the former, we get these words negative and positive emotionality as reference to how a child interacts with their environment. Positive emotionality is when a child is able to respond to the positive features of their environment, while negative emotionality is when a child resonates with the negative features of one's own environment. Well, let's imagine two children, one with positive emotionality and one with negative emotionality, both arriving at a park to play. The positive child notices the bright colors of the playground, the laughter of other kids, and the warmth of the sun. They feel energized, happy, and eager to engage with others in their surroundings. The child's mood lifts, mirroring the joyful aspects of the park. On the other hand, the child with negative emotionality might focus on the loud noises, the overwhelming number of people, or a small scuffle between other children. They might feel anxious, irritable, or sad, their mood reflecting the stressful or negative aspects of the park. These are indicative components of a child's temperament and are important to an individual's resilience through how other people react to them. The second component, along with emotionality, is self-regulation. Poor self-regulation skills are associated with frustration, tantrums, and disruptive behavior when the child is sad or even bored. Good self-regulatory skills are associated with restraint and discipline. Restraint is the ability to suppress anger when something goes wrong, and the discipline to finish a difficult task or a time-consuming household chore. There's two important terms which a child can express poor adjustment or bad self-regulation. A child can either internalize their problems or externalize them. To internalize their problems is to deal with them in a way that causes issues for the individuals themselves, and not for those around them. Things like depression, self-doubt, and poor self-esteem. In contrast, externalizing their problems will likely create issues for others by behaviors like acting out, aggression, and delinquency. Topic 2. Children's resilience to two types of risk factors. A relationship between a mother's psychopathology and psychopathology in the mother's children, psychopathology being the individual's mental health collectively, disorders, mental illness, etc., is often correlated. Research suggests that these relationships aren't disorder-specific. A child born to a mother with depression is at higher risk to develop depression themselves, but they are also at risk to develop a multitude of other mental health issues like anxiety disorders, conduct disorders, and substance abuse issues. In this section, we'll talk about the particular characteristics that may protect child from being negatively affected by their mother's psychopathologies. Furthermore, perhaps these same individual characteristics that protect a child against his or her mother's mental disorders also protect the child against other adverse life events, such as divorce. The following research paper examines how individual factors buffer the negative effects of maternal psychopathology and adverse life events, thus increasing resilience. The paper also addresses the protective effect of family factors on these risk factors. The study Resilience in the Face of Maternal Pathology and Adverse Life Events aims to identify factors predicting resilience among youth exposed to maternal psychopathology and adverse life events. It examines the effects of child and family factors on youth adjustment using cross-sectional data from a sample of 1,285 youths aged 9 to 17. The methodology includes a combination of observational measures and reports from youths and their caretakers. Key findings indicate that children generally show greater resilience when they have higher IQs, closer parental monitoring, better family functioning, higher educational aspirations, and when they are female. Specifically, the study found that higher IQ and female gender were protective factors, with higher IQ being a more general protective factor across different risk factors, while being female was more protective specifically against maternal psychopathology. Topic 3. Children's resilience to war and violence. Two factors may play a role in resilience to war and violence: mental flexibility and its converse, mental rigidity. Mental flexibility refers to the ability to think and solve problems creatively. Research shows that it's related to better endurance and recovering from traumatic stress brought on by war and violence. Conversely, studies have also shown that mental rigidity can numb adults' perceptions in extreme trauma cases, such as torture and imprisonment, which may protect individuals psychologically by helping them adapt to such situations. In this section, we're introduced to an article called Mental Flexibility as Resiliency Factors Among Children Exposed to Political Violence. 86 Palestinian children were measured for mental flexibility versus mental rigidity in violent conditions during the Intifada and then in more peaceful times 3 years later. The researchers hope to explain psychological adjustment between wartime and peacetime and what role these measures played in building resilience. A picture test was applied to measure flexible, rigid cognitive style and neuroticism. Self-esteem, emotional disorders, and PTSD were used as outcome variables. Results showing that mental flexibility played a moderating role by children being protected from negative long-term consequences of traumatic events. Results showed that mental flexibility played a moderating role by children being protected from negative long-term consequences of traumatic events if their perception ranked high for mental flexibility. Interestingly enough, this mental flexibility did not help them with good psychological adjustment in the short term while the war was occurring. It turns out the more intelligent and less exposed to traumatic events children were, the higher mental flexibility they showed. But let's take a closer look at this journal article. The author makes a distinction between divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking loosely referring to creativity, where it involves thinking of multiple solutions to one problem. For example, if I asked you how many different uses you can think for a coffee cup, the more divergent the thinker, the more uses they would be able to think up. Conversely, a convergent thinker comes up with the correct solution when there is only one solution to the particular problem. For example, the answer to 10 plus 5. It's important to note in the discussion section that mental flexibility as a long-term protective factor of recovering from trauma was symptom-specific. Although mental flexibility acted as a protective factor against developing some emotional disorders, it did not protect against the development of PTSD. Furthermore, rigid perception, although hypothesized as being a protective factor, was actually found to be a vulnerability factor, increasing the likelihood of developing either emotional disorders or PTSD. The concluded findings suggest mental flexibility gives partial protection to some emotional disorders in the long term, while a more rigid perception makes an individual more vulnerable and therefore prone to emotional disorders and PTSD. Topic 4. Preschool children's successful peer interactions. Literally nothing interesting happens here. Topic 5. Preventing eating disorders. This topic acts as a slam dunk on why the Kardashians are the worst family in the world and have likely contributed to the most adverse outcomes for women by way of unrealistic body standards. Lots of females hate their bodies. Diets, workout plans, waist trainers. The industry that aims to profit off women's dissatisfaction with their body image is alive and thriving. This is all because the ideal of the perfect woman, who tends to be tall and thin with narrow hips and large breasts, which sounds oddly like a skeleton to me. With this being the prevailing body type, the issue stems from only 5% of women having this body type naturally. This all leads to unhealthy dieting and weirdly erratic exercising behaviors. But in some of the worst cases, it can lead to eating disorders and suicide. There are several types of eating disorders, but two commonly affecting young females: anorexia and bulimia. Both of these eating disorders occur with a goal to lose weight, with anorexic people losing weight by trying to starve themselves, while people with bulimia, weight is lost by binge eating then throwing up, taking laxatives, or exercising to purge calories. It's important to note this perfect body standard doesn't directly cause eating disorders. Instead, the perfect body standard causes body dissatisfaction, which then causes the eating disorder. This delineation gives us a variable we can study and possibly affect, which is body dissatisfaction. Research has been conducted on the effects eating disorder prevention programs have on reducing body dissatisfaction in young females. Along with trying to diminish this adverse outcome, researchers also tried to facilitate their creation of protective factors in physical self-esteem and personal competence. They also hope to change young females' attitudes towards beauty standards and their current and future intention to use unhealthy methods of weight control. One study in particular was successful in achieving these goals for older women, but the effects on younger women were modest at best. Still, the authors concluded that physical self-esteem and personal competency appears to act as resilience factors with respect to body dissatisfaction and the unhealthy eating and weight loss practices that often follow. Topic 6. The risk and resilience framework and learning disabilities. Although having a learning disability may be assumed to correlate to a lower average intelligence, research into learning disabilities have been frequently associated with children of average and above average intelligence. This section describes ways to boost resilience in children with learning disabilities. First, what issues do children with learning disabilities struggle with? Hyperactivity, disruptive behaviors, and easily distractible, this occurring both in and out of the classroom. Again, there's an important delineation that needs to be made. These issues aren't caused by the learning disability, but the behavioral and personality aspects associated with the learning disability. The important adverse outcome, then, isn't actually connected to the inability to learn, but in the difficulty an individual with a learning disability has in interacting with their peers. This brings us to a study called General and Specific Issues, Researchers' Consideration in Applying the Risk and Resilience Framework to the Social Domain of Learning Disabilities by Wong. Wong begins by summarizing two important points from previous research done by Warner and Smith. The first point being, in spite of adversity such as poverty, parental substance abuse, and parental mental disorders, the majority of the individuals studied demonstrated resilience. The second being that a subgroup of 22 of the 72 individuals studied in the cohort had been diagnosed at age 10 as having learning disabilities. Over time, in older childhood and adolescence, this subgroup had cognitive and psychological problems, as well as trouble with the law. The learning disabled individuals also tended to possess an external locus of control, where they believed that they had little to no control over their lives, believing it to be controlled by external factors such as fate, luck, the actions of others, or societal forces. Interestingly, by 32, 75% of these individuals were faring well, both in work and in relationships. Question is why? Warner and Smith found that certain personality aspects, social competency and autonomy, and optimistic resiliency factors were related to a positive turnaround in lives of these learning disabled individuals. Wong's own study connected with this study heavily. Wong describes social perception and communication as skills children lack when they have a learning disability. They are poor at listening to what others have to say, and they have trouble communicating with others. They also have trouble identifying others' emotions and regulating their own emotions. These all lead to difficulty making and keeping friends. Wong suggests the possible benefit of a direct intervention approach where learning disabled individuals could improve their social skills through role-playing. Another approach suggested leaning on the factors that prior research has identified to buffer poor social interaction. Athletic skill is proven as a buffer, and the high proficiency in sports is known to lead to higher social peer acceptance. She theorizes that helping a learning disabled child hone their athletic skills could help them socialize more readily with their peer groups. That's the end of Module 2. In Module 1, we were introduced to the concept of resilience, and we identified terms to more effectively understand studies. And in Module 2, we learned about the individual factors such as temperament and IQ. In Module 3, we will talk about the familial factors that foster resilience in the individual. Factors such as parents' perception and attitudes, parental warmth, setting of boundaries, and extended family social support can increase resilience in at-risk individuals. Remember, there are many forms of adversity a child can face: violent neighborhoods, health issues, or lack of community. Research has found that families play one of the strongest roles in increasing individual resilience. For example, premature infants are at risk for adverse psychological consequences. However, those who receive plenty of stimulation and attention from their caregivers have higher developmental scores compared to similar premature infants who receive lower levels of such stimulation and attention. Topic 1. Overview of family resilience. In order to help families deal with stress and trauma, clinicians take to understanding the mechanisms of familial resilience and the familial resilience framework. This framework teaches families to recognize their positive attributes and help them increase their self-efficacy. We're introduced to a paper by Froma Walsh, written in April 2002. In it, she discusses this framework and how it can be utilized to shift conversations in the context of family therapy from weaknesses to strengths. But first, she explains how family therapy has shifted from the medical model and psychoanalysis toward a family resilience model. The medical model assumes that mental illness has the same cause as physical illness, due to factors such as genetics. For example, someone with depression would be seen as a victim of their own genetics, and the depression having nothing to do with their environment. The family resilience approach views family problems using a stress diathesis model. Diathesis refers to a biological predisposition, and stress introduces an environmental component, recognizing the dual role of inheritance and environmental factors in the expression of a problem. Family therapy has shifted from viewing troubled families as hopelessly dysfunctional to seeing family members as capable of helping one another. The family is now seen as a resource, and the goal of therapy is to identify and strengthen those family capacities that enable members to deal with adversity. Walsh also reminds us of how significant relationships with caring adults and mentors help build resilience in these children. On familial relationships, Walsh also introduces us to genograms, which is similar to a family tree, but gives the clinician a more in-depth understanding of the quality of relationships between family members. These are all the symbols that accompany a genogram, conveying different information like addictions or physical or mental illness, the type of relationship between parents, and most importantly, the quality of relationships between members of the family. Now we move into the family resilience framework that Walsh identifies. The framework outlines key components and factors that contribute to family resilience. Adaptive coping strategies. Family facing the loss of a loved one might come together to celebrate the life of the deceased, focusing on the love and legacy left behind rather than solely on the loss. Mean-making processes. After a job loss, a family chooses to view it as an opportunity for a new beginning, exploring new careers or entrepreneurial endeavors that align more closely with their passions. Fostering flexibility. When a family member is diagnosed with a chronic illness, the family adapts their daily routines and roles to accommodate the changing needs, emphasizing teamwork and accountability. Connectedness. During times of stress, a family might prioritize regular family meetings or activities that reinforce their bond, such as shared meals, game nights, or outdoor adventures. Open communication. A family facing financial difficulties decides to have open discussions about their budget and financial planning, encouraging all members to contribute ideas and solutions, fostering a sense of agency and collaboration. These components lead to familial resistance. Topic 2, parenting styles and resilience in African American children. We're asked to recall what we've learned about individual resilience factors and the specific risks facing many African American children: poverty, stigmatization, and discrimination. This topic will introduce you to family factors that help or hinder African American youth. In a paper by McCabe, Clark, and Barnett titled Family Protective Factors Among Urban African American Youth, extended family kinship support, father involvement, and caregiver warmth, demandingness, and use of corporal punishment influence adverse outcomes in African American children. Previous research found a connection with kinship and stress, where kinship was a positive influence in the lives of these children. There's been very little research on father involvement and children's adjustment. This is an area of interest in the present study, particularly because many African American children are born to unwed mothers. As with kinship support, father involvement was examined both as a unique contributor and as a moderator of child's adjustment. Two dimensions are discussed in the paper, that of warmth and demandingness. Warmth as related to acceptance and responsiveness, while demandingness being related to setting high standards for child performance and setting age-appropriate rules. From these two dimensions, we can develop 4 types of parenting styles: authoritative, high on both warmth and demandingness; authoritarian, low on warmth, high on demandingness; permissive, high on warmth, low on demandingness; and neglectful, low on both warmth and demandingness. The study found that warmth and demandingness failed to interact to predict child adjustment. This is theorized to be a possible reason that authoritative parenting, which is described as combination of high warmth and demandingness, has not been found to predict success among African American children as it has for Caucasian children. These factors may then interact with a child separate from one another. It's important to not generalize minority groups to majority groups in this way, since many groups have different risk factors and levels of risk, which may need specific research into resilience and protective factors to correct. Topic 3. Resilience in families with special needs children. We're now introduced to a study on ways to enhance family resilience, particularly families of a child whose special needs. The study touches on resilience in every member of the family, parents, and other healthy siblings. James Webb begins with statistics about the dramatic change of the family unit over the last 20 years, explaining that the so-called typical family doesn't really exist. Single-parent homes are on the rise. Homes where grandparents constitute the primary givers are increasingly common. Full custodial father-led homes are one of the fastest-growing populations in the U.S. For economic and personal reasons, increased numbers of families are at risk for problems including depression, addiction, and abuse. Webb tells us a story to give us some indication on where this study is going. He tells us of an interview of a son who was born with genetic abnormalities and confined to a wheelchair due to the mother's use of the drug thalidomide. The son was in his 30s now, and although he admitted that growing up was difficult and he had overcome many obstacles, he was pretty much completely fine with his disabilities, considering them surmounted. Unfortunately, the mother had a very different view of this story. Her husband had died 5 years prior due to high blood pressure and a heart attack. This she largely contributes to the stress associated with raising their son, saying he was not a man to share his feelings. She talked about how lonely she was now that he was gone. She also shared how she had 2 daughters, one leaving home at 16 and the other leaving at 18. Both of which she had very little contact with, and both feeling great resentment and anger about the energy and time that had gone into raising their brother. With a look of despair and profound sadness, the mother declared, "Isn't it a shame that the only person who turned out okay was the person with the disability?" In the research article, May outlines 3 areas he will examine from this story. The place where stresses most likely will occur when a child is diagnosed with a disability, the mother and father's reaction, how their responses might be the same or be different, and what will be most helpful as a couple and as a family, what will build familial resilience. The first stage as a family dealing with a child's diagnosis of a chronic illness or developmental disability is the survival stage. This period can be brief or lengthy, but common responses to this survival period include one person becoming the designated expert, typically the mother. This can leave the father feeling left behind, both in knowledge of the child's condition, but also in his relationship to his partner. Lines of communication can disintegrate, especially if their decisions and roles become stratified and inflexible. The potential of over-involvement of one parent with the child is a possibility. Because of the child's special needs, partners can forget about their own primary relationships, which can result in feelings of resentment, confusion, and anger. Favorite activities can be missed, a reduced sex life can occur, and the primary topic always becomes the care of the child. 3 other children can feel that they need to navigate how to fit in this new family alone. They can begin to feel resentment of the double standards of care for them compared to their sibling with special needs. 4, financial issues can seem overwhelming, especially if the family lacks adequate insurance and faces enormous healthcare bills. 5, with the child facing the new world of having a disability, they can be faced with a maze of regulations, acronyms, and language guaranteed to confuse, startle, and bewilder. There can be little information, and other families going through the same thing. It can feel isolating. A recent Canadian article completed a longitudinal study of hundreds of families and the stresses they experience as parents of children with special needs. Their findings included 88% of parents reported feeling tired or overloaded. 90% stated they were stressed about balancing work and family obligations. 39% reported their employment status had been affected. 26% reported their choice of occupation had been constrained. 46% said their work schedules had been affected. 68% had turned down overtime. 27% had to forego opportunities for promotion. And 64% of 2-parent families with one parent unemployed reported their child's special needs were a major factor in their unemployment. This leads us into a discussion about the gender differences of parenting. May outlines mothers as being more nurturing, while men are very physical in their father-child interactions. Fathers often want a child to exhibit levels of independence in problem solving. Mothers hold infants inward to protect them, while men often carry young children on their shoulders or throw them in the air. Parenting a child with special needs can intensify such differences. Issues such as proper feeding and child discipline can create tension. Women often freely express their emotions emotions, and many men hold them in. Women are relational and reach out to others for comfort and understanding. Men often choose to go it alone, inheriting a more stoic approach. The John Wayne mentality, something along the lines of "I'm strong and don't need any help." It's a powerful injunction that many men embrace. In response to a tragedy like the Oklahoma bombings, upon entering the memorial service, women received roses, children received teddy bears, and men received nothing. The statement is clear. You are on your own. Many men suffer in silence, not knowing that what they are experiencing is similar to other men, and that their anger is really a cover for fear and sadness. Clearly, both parents need to be engaged in caring for the child with special needs, and they also need to be focused on enhancing their interpersonal relationship. Finding such a balance can be difficult. All of this makes the fact that some families will actually function better after a crisis all the more surprising. Why is an incredibly important question. Without being overly simplistic or fanciful, living well with a disability is greatly determined by how you look at it, the family's perception. In a major study regarding families of children with profound disabilities, the researchers concluded that parental beliefs were the single most powerful predictor of family outcomes in coping with a disability. Simply the practice of seeing the glass as half full. Although they wish their child never had a disability, these parents see their disabled children as the real teacher, saying how the child has made them better parents, more patient, understanding, and sensitive to the needs of others. They don't ever become bitter or cynical. Resilient families are also knowledgeable about their child's disability, which helps them retain personal control. They have a thorough awareness about treatments, their legal rights, and schooling in relation to their specific needs and concerns. Resilient families can also exhibit a desire to collaborate in the best interest of the child. They work together. For many families, spirituality is a critically important part of raising a child with special needs. It can be an anchor that keeps them grounded in the midst of many storms. They find an inner calm and balance that settles the outward struggles. This discovery of a higher power, which can mean many things, including and excluding a singular God, they find a source of hope and peace. Some individuals pray while others meditate, reflect on walks, visit art museums, or attend concerts. These actions doing work to strengthen their soul. The final great contributor to familial resilience is the willingness to surround oneself with support. It is true that isolation promotes helplessness. Kids need other kids while families need other families. It is true that it takes a village to raise a child. And if that child were to have special needs, that village becomes all the more powerful and important. Topic 4, protective effects of minimizing work-family conflict. Most of the research presented in this course has focused on resilience in children and adolescents. Now we examine resilience in adults with respect to balancing work and family life. There's been a proliferation of two-income earners in the family unit during the last few decades. This puts more stress on working parents to balance work and family life and to feel successful in both realms. In the study Work, Family, and Mental Health, testing different modes of work-family fit, this is further explored where the researchers test the idea that work and family can benefit each other. We're introduced to the idea of work-family fit, which is a combination of enhancement and conflict. This combination is highly specific to each individual person and family. Nonetheless, the study's primary goal was to further specify the fit construct by empirically testing 3 different combinations of work-family conflict and work-family facilitation. Work-family conflict is referring to incompatibilities between work and family responsibilities because of limited resources. Some examples would be missing dance recitals or being drained when one gets to work because they were up late with a crying baby. Work-family facilitation, on the other hand, including the related concepts of work-family compatibility and work-family enhancement, represents the synergies that occur when individuals combine work and family. To explore this work-family fit, researchers use something more familiar within this course, family resilience theory, which will help us explore why some families are resilient in the face of this particular risk factor. So this study has 2 research questions. Which model of work-family conflict and facilitation best predicts mental health among working adults? And 2, does work-family facilitation promote elimination or assimilation strategies of adjustment to work-family conflict? The study found that work-family facilitation, particularly from family to work, serves as a protective factor that can mitigate the adverse effects of work-family conflict on mental health. Specifically, high levels of family-to-work facilitation were associated with better mental health outcomes, even in the presence of work-family conflict. This suggests that when individuals perceive that their family role positively impacts their work role, it can buffer against the stress and negative mental health implications of work-family conflict. Conversely, high levels of work-family conflict, including both work interfering with family and family interfering with work, were associated with poor mental health outcomes. These results underline the complex interplay between different dimensions of work-family fit and their distinct impacts on mental health. These findings are important both theoretically and practically. Theoretically, the results support the notion that work-family fit is a multi-dimensional construct that includes both negative and positive aspects, each of which affects mental health. Practically, the study suggests that interventions aimed at improving work-family fit should not only focus on reducing conflict, but also on enhancing facilitation from family to work. For employers, this means creating policies and practices that recognize the positive effect family life has on employees. In short, a better work-family fit can lead to improved mental health and job satisfaction. In summary, the study contributes to a deeper understanding of the work-family interface and its implications for mental health. By highlighting the protective role of work-family facilitation, the research provides valuable insights for developing more effective strategies to support working adults in balancing their work and family responsibilities for optimal mental health outcomes. Topic 5. Family resilience in alcohol or other drug uses in youth. There are many things that can go wrong in a teen's life. They can develop a disability, become addicted to a substance, or listen to Taylor Swift. In this section, we explored the protective factors familial resilience plays in protecting youth from misusing drugs and alcohol. I use the term misuse since most teenagers experiment with substances. We wonder if familial protective factors can determine how much experimentation there is. An interesting fact about youth is peer pressure is highest between the 6th and 8th grades, when individuals are about 11 to 13 years old. At this age, youth are particularly vulnerable to groupthink, doing pretty much whatever it takes to fit in with their peers. Depending on the crowd they are trying to fit in with, some youth may be pressured into trying drugs and alcohol. It's important to note that this pressure isn't so obvious as someone forcing it down their throat. Or else. It could be a pressure that they force upon themselves that can come from wanting to be cool or just not wanting to be uncool. A compounding effect causes increased likelihood of drug use in these years is underdeveloped communication skills and an inability to say no. In this stage of life, youths are also undergoing acute cognitive developments that involve starting to think about thinking. This gives rise to what is called adolescent egocentrism. This term refers to the belief of young adolescents that they are the focus of other people's attention. This concept is called imaginary audience, and that their thoughts and feelings are unique, which this concept is called the personal fable. Young adolescents believe that everyone is watching and judging their every move, and that their peers will find out if, for example, they were too chicken to try drugs or alcohol, and think they are uncool. Furthermore, because young adolescents believe they are unique, they may believe that other people develop drug and alcohol problems, but that it won't happen to them. Such thinking clearly makes them vulnerable for engaging in risky behaviors. In addition to social and cognitive changes, there are additional factors that put pre- and early teens at risk for alcohol and drug use. For example, coming from a low socioeconomic status and doing poorly in school put adolescents at further risk for engaging in drug and alcohol use. The paper we are introduced to focuses on family-based interventions designed to prevent and reduce alcohol and drug use among high-risk 12 to 14-year-olds. In the study, preventing and reducing alcohol and other drug use among high-risk youths by increasing familial resilience, a community-based intervention program was implemented in multiple church communities in rural, suburban, and inner-city settings. These programs included training for parents and youths, early intervention services, and follow-up case management. Recognizing the pivotal role of family resilience in preventing substance abuse, the researchers aimed to implement a community-based program designed to strengthen this resilience within families. The initiative was driven by the understanding that enhancing familial resilience could serve as protective factors against substance use in adolescents, thereby addressing a critical gap in substance abuse prevention efforts. The study reported direct positive effect on family resilience as a result of the program. indicating that the intervention successfully strengthened the targeted resilience factors within families. The evaluation found positive moderating effects on the delayed use of alcohol and drugs and the frequency of alcohol and drug use among youth. These effects were observed in the form of conditional relationships with changes in those family resilience factors targeted by the program, suggesting that enhancing family resilience could indeed mitigate the risk of substance use among high-risk adolescents. The findings of this study underscore the importance of family resilience as a critical protective factor against adolescent substance use. By demonstrating that a community-based program focused on strengthening family resilience can have a measurable impact on delaying and reducing alcohol and drug use among high-risk youth, the study provides valuable insights into effective strategies for substance abuse prevention. These results suggest that interventions aimed at enhancing family resilience could be a viable approach to mitigate the risks associated with substance use in adolescents, thereby contributing to broader efforts to address this significant public health challenge. The authors note two unanticipated results in their study. Increased alcohol use was associated with increased positive parental communication, as well as youth bonding with the mother. The authors believe that these results are due to parents over-reporting positive communication and bonding, due to the dynamics of denial that often occur in families with drug and alcohol problems. This finding illustrates the problem with self-reports measures. As noted above, parents reported better communication with their youth, but the youth did not confirm this. Thus, the possibility that some parents may be reporting positive aspects of their relationship with their child due to denial is viable. In conclusion, the study highlights the potential of family resilience-focused interventions in preventing and reducing alcohol and drug use among high-risk youths. By strengthening the protective factors within families, such programs can play a crucial role in substance abuse prevention, offering a promising avenue for future research and intervention strategies in this area. Topic 6. Resilience in Romanian orphans adopted into Canadian families. With our final topic of Module 3, we are presented with interesting research from a study that occurred of Romanian orphans adopted by Canadian parents. In most countries, the notion that family or family-like environments are the optimal place to raise a child is widely accepted. For this reason, institutional care of orphan children is a thing of the past in Canada and the US. However, orphanages still exist in some areas of the world. Children raised in these types of institutions face a high risk of environmental deprivation and the absence of important attachment experiences with caregivers. We examine an instance of this institutional care that occurred in Romania in the 1980s. In some Romanian orphanages, children outnumbered caregivers 20-1, causing them to suffer from a lack of social and physical stimulation. This then causing them further to become withdrawn and unresponsive to others. After film of these children was released in Canada, Canadian parents adopted many of these children. The study follows their journey from withdrawn and unresponsive in an institutionalized environment to homes full of social and physical stimulation. So how did these children change? Were these parents able to provide a family environment that reversed the negative effects of institutionalization on the child? Lucy Lemaire, an associate professor in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University, who teaches early childhood development and education, has explored this very question. Lucy Lemaire researches resilience through the adoption of these Romanian children into Canadian homes. Firstly, why did this situation in Romania occur? In Romania at this time, there were over 100,000 children living in institutions. Now, these children were referred to as orphans, and the place they were living were referred to as orphanages. But that wasn't exactly correct, as most of these children's parents were living. This means that most of these children were abandoned. Before 1989, Romania was plagued by a communist dictatorship, and the population of Romania was incredibly heavily taxed and the economy was in horrible shape, so people were extremely poor. Also, the communist regime had a very strong pronatal policy, where birth control was outlawed and abortion was also outlawed. On top of that, women were expected to produce as many children as physically possible. These factors, coupled with an official government belief that the state is better at taking care of children than the parents are, made it completely commonplace for women to give birth in the hospital and leave that hospital without their baby. The conditions in these institutions were horrific. We've talked about the caregivers being outnumbered by children 20-1, but it's important to remember that Romania at this time is incredibly poor. There were very little resources, and the institutions were last in line to receive these very few resources that were put in place. Children were deprived of food, water, medical care, love, warmth. Most of these institutions were cold and barren. After some children were adopted in Canadian households, a study was designed to see what the impact was of this extremely early deprivation in some of these children, and to what extent being raised in a good home after this deprivation allowed them to overcome that early experience, or display resilience. So 3 groups of children were studied. The first group was called the Romanian Children's Group. This group was made up of Romanian children that had spent at least 8 months in a Romanian orphanage. The other 2 groups were comparison groups. First group is Canadian children raised in Canada, and this group is matched to the orphan children by factors such as age, sex, and family socio-demographic factors. Now, there are differences in these groups when compared, but we can't be sure what those differences are. It could be because the Romanian children went through an adoption when they were young, and the Canadian-born children didn't. It could be that the Romanian children were abandoned at birth, and could have been abandoned because something was wrong. And that's what explains the difference in these 2 groups. Because of this, there's a need for a third group, a second comparison group. Romanian children adopted in Canadian families that didn't go through the orphanage experience. What's important about this second comparison group is it isolates the outcomes of the orphanage experience, since when this group is compared to the first comparison group, they too were abandoned and experienced an adoption. They were also destined for institutions, but were luckily adopted before they entered them, unlike our first comparison group who experienced the institutions for 8 months or more. This longitudinal study would see the children for the first time when they were 11 months, then again when they were 4.5 years old, and the third time would occur when they were 10.5. Across those 3 assessments, intellectual development, personality development had been analyzed along with social and emotional development. Parenting issues and family dynamics were looked at along with any behavioral problems. The results from these 3 sets of data is the Romanian-born children are doing distinctly worse than the Canadian-born group and the Romanian-born pre-institutionalized adopted group. Another interesting fact is that the pre-institutionalized adopted group is doing equally as well as the Canadian-born group, seemingly because they didn't experience the orphanages at all. These results explain that it is indeed the deprivation, both physically and emotionally, that accounts for these differences. Within the Romanian orphan group, there is a high degree of variability, with some individuals doing quite well in all domains assessed and others experiencing significant challenges in those same domains. And the strongest correlation to the well-being of these Romanian children that experienced institutions was the length of stay. The longer they stayed in the orphanages, the poorer their well-being in the long run. It's important to note that the correlation is weakening in relation to time. Between length of stay and IQ, for example, the correlation in the children was higher than it was at 10.5, which signals improvement as time goes on. These are some of the family factors that might relate to these differences in groups. It's important to note that there is very little variability in the families. All children were put into good homes. The measure used to determine how good the homes were is called the home observation measure of the environment, which measures how much nurturance and stimulation is available to the child in their home. This measure was taken when the child was 4.5. This data was compared to academic outcome when the children were seen again at 10.5 years old. And what was found was children coming from homes that were more appropriately nurturing and stimulating doing much better in school at 10.5. They also have less difficulties with attention, suggesting not only does the home environment affect outcomes at school, but affects the mental capabilities of children directly. This means environmental nurturing and stimulation at home works as a protective factor for these children. Module 4 focuses on resilience factors in an individual's community, like big brother, sister programs, or after-school programs. Community risk factors that affect an individual could be living in a poor and violent neighborhood, for example. In the same way that there are many benefits to increasing resilience in the individual and in the family, increasing resilience within the community also provides benefits. In this module, we will learn how the resilience framework has been applied in practice to prevention and intervention studies that aim to increase community resilience in groups at risk for adversity. Topic 1, the mentoring power of Big Brother and Big Sister. In our first module of Chapter 4, we explored the concept of Big Brothers and Big Sisters, which is a community-led program that pairs youth with the same-sex big brother or sister. These older young adults can often fill a parental gap, such as a single-parent home or when there is little support provided to the child, either from one or both parents. The Big Brothers program was officially founded in 1958 and Big Sisters in 1970. The programs merged in 1977. Anecdotal evidence has supported the program's positive impact on children and youth, but the program has not been systematically researched until fairly recently. Research compared youth who were randomly assigned to either a big brother or big sister, which was the mentored group, or to a waiting list control group. The waiting list control group was virtually identical in characteristics to the mentor group. After 18 months, the researchers compared the mentor group with the waiting list control group on a variety of factors. The results between groups are quite dramatic. Clearly, the Big Brother, Big Sister program builds resilience in children at risk for adversity. Let's answer these 6 questions to get a better understanding of this community resilience program. Describe the demographic or characteristics of the little brothers and sisters who are a part of the program. Typically, littles are between the ages of 6 and 18, and many littles come from low-income families or single-parent households. Littles may be facing challenges in school ranging from academic performance to social integration. And the program serves a diverse range of ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, often aiming to match littles with bigs of similar backgrounds to enhance understanding and connection. Describe the demographic characteristics of the big brothers and sisters. Bigs are adults, usually aged 18 or older, with many programs requiring bigs to be at least 21. And bigs come from various backgrounds and professions and educational levels, united by a desire to volunteer and help children. Bigs commit to spending a few hours, typically 2 to 3 times a month, with their littles for at least 1 year. Contrast the differences between a prescriptive relationship and a developmental relationship. In a prescriptive relationship, this approach involves the mentor setting goals and activities with little input from the mentee, focusing on correcting behavior or improving specific outcomes. It tends to be more structured and directive. Developmental relationships contrast with the prescriptive model by emphasizing growth and learning through the relationship itself. The mentor supports the mentee's own interests and goals, fostering a sense of empowerment and self-determination. It's characterized by flexibility, mutual respect, and responsiveness to the mentee's needs. Now, prospective relationships, in terms of results, can lead to improvements in specific areas targeted by the mentor. It may not foster a deep personal connection or intrinsic motivation in the mentee, but it can sometimes lead to resistance if the mentee feels their autonomy is undermined. Developmental relationships tend to result in stronger, more meaningful connections between bigs and littles. Mentees in developmental relationships often show enhanced self-esteem, better academic performance, and improved social skills, driven by a sense of personal achievement and support. So how can a mentor-rich environment be creative? We should promote the benefits of mentoring within communities and workplace to attract diverse volunteers. Then provide comprehensive training for mentors can foster developmental relationships along with ongoing support and resources. Building partnerships with schools, businesses, and community organizations to support mentoring initiatives and create more opportunities for positive adult interactions with youth. Regularly collecting feedback from both mentors and mentees to adapt the program to better meet their needs and enhance the mentoring experience. Topic 2. Children's positive peer relationships and family adversity. Recall that family risk factors such as low socioeconomic status, marital conflict, and harsh physical discipline can put children at risk for adverse outcomes such as externalizing behaviors. Also recall that externalizing behaviors include acting out and displaying aggression towards others. Previous research has found that 2 important buffers to developing externalizing behaviors in the face of family risk factors are peer group acceptance and a number of friendship networks. The study we will look at in this section examines these 2 buffers for 3 family risk factors: ecological risk, which is socioeconomic disadvantage, single parent status, and family stress, marital conflict, and harsh physical discipline. In addition, the authors also examined how gender and ethnic differences, as well as temperament and social information processing patterns, affected the buffering capabilities of peer group acceptance and number of friendship networks on family risk factors. In the study Family Adversity, Positive Peer Relationships, and Children's Externalizing Behavior, a longitudinal perspective on risk and resilience, 585 families with 5-year-old children were assessed at home and at school in a longitudinal study where they were researched for peer relations in grade 1 and then again in grade 2 for externalizing behaviors. Families were assessed through a combination of interviews and questionnaires. Specifically, the study focused on 3 main areas of family adversity: ecological disadvantage, which was determined based on a combination of low socioeconomic status, high family stress, and single parent status; violent marital conflict, assessed through interviews with both mothers and fathers, if available; harsh discipline, evaluated based on an interviewer's rating of the parent's use of harsh physical discipline; and externalizing behaviors were assessed by a report form from teachers asking them to measure these children on a checklist of behaviors such as gets into fights and disobedient at school. The study found that positive peer relationships, specifically peer acceptance and friendships, serve as moderating factors in the relationship between family adversity and children's externalizing behaviors. Peer acceptance was a consistent moderator across all 3 measures of family adversity. It significantly moderated the association between family adversity and child externalizing behaviors. Friendship served as a moderator to the impact of harsh discipline on externalizing behaviors. Similar to peer acceptance, friendship could mitigate the negative effects of harsh discipline on children's externalizing behaviors, although this effect was specific to harsh discipline among the measures of family adversity. Each measure of family adversity, ecological disadvantage, violent marital conflict, and harsh discipline, was positively associated with children's externalizing behaviors. Both family adversity and positive peer relationships independently predicted children's externalizing behavior. This highlights the complex interplay between risk factors, family adversity, and protective factors. Positive peer relationships in influencing child development. The study underscores the importance of peer relationships in children's lives, suggesting that positive peer interactions can serve as a buffer against the potential negative impacts of family adversity on children's externalizing behaviors. This indicates a potential avenue for interventions aimed at promoting resilience in children facing family adversity. Topic 3, community support for adolescents during parental divorce and remarriage. Let's begin this topic with a statistic. Currently, about 45% of all marriages in Canada and about 49% of all marriages in the United States end in divorce. And often the individuals most affected are the adolescent children that are involved. Factors associated with these effects have been well researched. Individual factors such as the adolescent's age and temperament, family factors such as family support systems, family conflict, relationship between the divorced couple, and nature of custody, and ecological factors such as changes in disposable income for the custodial parent, which may result in lower socioeconomic status. Due to the stress that occurs during the period of divorce and adjustment, the custodial parent or parents may not be sufficiently monitoring and supporting their adolescent children during this time of transition, unintentionally placing their children at greater risks. Such reductions in monitoring and support may result in adolescent externalization, like drug and alcohol use or engaging in sexual activity, or possibly internalizing behaviors, like lowered self-esteem or depression. Furthermore, as many divorced individuals eventually remarry, adjusting to a new step-parent and sometimes children from the step-parent's previous marriage can further add to the stress on an adolescent. Parental remarriage can be a particularly difficult time for adolescents, and resurgence in externalizing and or internalizing behaviors often occurs. Although there's a large body of research on the risk factors associated with the increased negative effects of divorce and remarriage on adolescents, there's little research on how positive extrafamiliar factors such as peer relations, non-parental adult relations, and school attachment can buffer or reduce the negative impacts of divorce and remarriage on adolescent children. In this section, we're introduced to a study called Risk and Resiliency Factors Among Adolescents Who Experience Marital Transitions. The study focuses on adolescents experiencing marital transitions within their family, including those who live with never divorced parents, a parent and a step-parent, or a divorced single parent. The sample consisted of 2,144 adolescents from grades 7, 9, and 11 in a metropolitan city in the southeastern United States, with schools selected to represent a cross-section of the city's adolescent population. Data was collected through an anonymous 145-item questionnaire administered during a regular classroom period, focusing on family risk factors like parental support and monitoring, as well as non-familial factors such as peer support, school attachment, and neighborhood support. Adolescents from families undergoing marital transitions may experience a range of adverse outcomes, but the study specifically investigates externalizing behaviors, which can include aggression, delinquency, and other conduct issues. Now, the study discusses several resilience factors, including parental support, parental monitoring, peer support, school attachment, and neighborhood support. It investigates how these factors can buffer the adverse effects of familial disruptions on adolescents' externalizing behaviors. The research finds that the impact of marital transitions on adolescents' externalizing behaviors can be moderated by a combination of family and community support systems. Peer support, parental support, and school attachment emerged as significant protective factors that can mitigate the potential negative outcomes associated with family structural changes. This study contributes to the understanding of risk and resilience among adolescents facing marital transitions by highlighting the importance of both familial and non-familial support systems in promoting adolescents' well-being in the face of family adversity. Topic 4. After-school homework programs and academic resilience. Homework is an integral part of the school learning experience. As homework demands increase and parents are required to work more, some children may be at risk for not completing homework assignments. Children who do not have a comfortable home environment where they can do their homework and or may not have help from their parents when they need it may be at risk for dropping in school performance. Now, this research paper examines the effects of after-school programs on homework for students at risk. The researchers ask, will providing a structured after-school learning environment help children complete their homework and lead to better grades in school? In this research paper, the study chronicles an experiment called Gervit's Homework Project. This study targeted elementary school children from the 4th to the 6th grade, encompassing a broad range of abilities and backgrounds, including students with limited English proficiency. At the inception of the program, 146 students across 3 schools were assigned to either the control group, which were the non-participants, or the homework participation group. Now, the sample was diverse. It was largely Latino, 60% so, and Caucasian at 30%, with 31% having limited English proficiency at the start. The methodology involved dividing students into high and low attendance groups to assess the impact of program participation intensity on outcomes. Standardized test scores, self-efficacy, and future aspirations were measured, along with qualitative data from interviews. The primary adverse outcomes the project aimed to address were issues related to homework completion, academic performance, and the development of study skills. The program's resilience factors included providing structured homework assistance, increasing self-efficacy, and future aspirations among high-dosage participants. Increasing self-efficacy and future aspirations among high-dosage participants and offering a protective function for students with limited English proficiency. Significant differences based on attendance patterns indicated that more frequent participation was associated with better academic outcomes. But the project found no significant differences in outcomes between the treatment and control groups overall, possibly due to the existence of other after-school programs and the variability in attendance. However, more detailed analysis suggests that high-dosage participants showed improvements in academic performance and self-efficacy. The program offered protective benefits for students with limited English proficiency, highlighting the importance of regular attendance and targeted support for at-risk students. Topic 5. Cultural continuity in Aboriginal communities. Historically, the Canadian government government has attempted to assimilate Aboriginal people and suppress their culture. Many Aboriginal communities have had land and autonomy taken away from them and are often victims of racism and marginalization. Now, not surprisingly, these risk factors have led to adverse outcomes in many Aboriginal communities, such as drug and alcohol abuse, depression, and suicide ideation. Many Aboriginal communities have looked back to their roots and traditions in order to find ways of healing. In this section, Dr. Chandler outlines his research and discusses the startling findings that point to the importance of cultural continuity to the well-being of Aboriginal youth. In Chandler's research, he delves into Aboriginal youth suicide and his interest in understanding how a variety of problems, suicide being at the most extreme, affects a young person's growth and development. Now, there are many issues associated with perceptions surrounding Aboriginal suicide rates. Aboriginal people have a suicide rate 3 to 5 times higher than the general population, and many times higher still for the young Aboriginal population, where some researchers suggest it could be as high as 200 times the national average, which is the highest suicide rate for any culturally identifiable group in the world. Research findings suggest that if you organize suicide rates from individual bands across Canada, the graph is starkly sawtooth, showing how some native bands' suicide rates are much, much worse than others. Now, this finding is so stark that in actuality, more than half of all Aboriginal communities had no recorded deaths by suicide at all. That means the elevated statistics of suicide actually comes from a further vulnerable community of half the native bands. This means that there are some native bands that have suicide rates that are 800 times the national average. This is also keeping in mind about 50% of the native bands have suicide rates that are less than the national average. So what makes these native bands different? Our at-risk group is Aboriginal peoples. Our adverse outcome is suicide, and the important protective variables from the research are identified as cultural continuity, meaning what does the self mean and how is one connected to one's community. These types of community connections can be in the construction of buildings connecting people to their culture or Aboriginal language, gaining control over education and policing facilities in the band's own area. The more these factors are implemented, the lower youth suicide rates plummet in these communities. Topic 6, Resiliency after disaster. In this section, we are introduced to a blog post titled Growth After Disaster: Going Beyond Resilience by Sean Atcher, a researcher specializing in disaster and trauma. Sean introduced a research principle called falling up. This refers to how some positive outliers, individuals with high optimism and success, manage to grow not despite a trauma, but because of it. He introduces a brief, positive psychological experiment that you can try right now. On a sheet of paper, you could quickly jot down 3 of the greatest moments of growth in your life. You could do it right now before listening ahead. Sean discusses how when he does this simple exercise at companies, close to 90% of the responses are related to some highly stressful period of change. Many people cite going to college, studying abroad, playing in the finals, quitting a job to find a better one, the birth of a child, or even depression. He notes that he's never had someone respond that a vacation was one of their greatest moments of growth. He hypothesizes that the reason is stress and change are the engines of human growth. Yet we often find ourselves unable to fall asleep at night thinking of all the stressful things that could happen to us. Hurricanes, flooding, stock crashes, failure at work, problems in our relationships, sickness, having to move. Now, negative experiences don't come without their negative effects. PTSD is a symptom of traumatic events. Sean is not interested in these people, or even people who bounce back from trauma and become the same as they were post-traumatic event. Sean is interested in the outliers who are affected by trauma, but who turn it into long-term growth. Sean continues to emphasize that positive psychology never argues that trauma itself is good. But the catastrophe is not the end of the story. Once a trauma has occurred, positive psychology prompts people to ask, what now? If you Google post-traumatic growth, you will find a wealth of research on individuals who experience growth after the worst traumas you can imagine: heart attack, breast cancer, military combat, refugee displacement. What baffles Sean and other researchers is why some people, after experiencing a heart attack, become altruistic and get their principles in line, or how the loss of a job leads to a shifting of career choice to one which aligns better with that person's strengths, or why someone can walk away from a car accident with a new lease on life, or how cancer can help deepen social support networks for survivors. Research has illuminated differences between people who experience growth after trauma and those who do not. First, these individuals continue to believe that their behavior still matters, which is one of the components of optimism. If you have experienced a trauma, find one concrete action, something you know you can do to decrease the negative feelings associated with the trauma. For example, if you had a heart attack, decide to give up desserts on Sundays. This gives your brain a win, allowing it to keep moving forward. Secondly, post-traumatic growth blooms best in a soil of deep social support. If you have experienced a trauma, try to actively invest in your social support network, rather than passively waiting for that network to invest in you in the midst of hardship. Everyone has their own timetable for recovery, but post-traumatic growth can begin to occur at any point in the grieving process. Whether it be one day or 10 years later, social support speeds the process of recovery. Third, change the way you describe the trauma to yourself. For example, when Sean was at Harvard Divinity School, he went through 2 years of depression. Because of that depression, and not despite of it, he began to understand what gets in the way of him, creating positive change in his life. And that jump-started his interest in positive psychology and helping people change their mindset and their habits. So if it were not for depression, he would not have the understanding nor the compassion to help people like he can today. Learning to tell himself that story rather than the pessimistic version of what happened has been key to his growth. Now, trauma is always bad, but it's also the beginning of the story, not the end. And in the midst of tragedy, we must mourn, but also maintain a belief that our behavior still matters and that growth in life is still possible. And that's the end of this class. If you want to support me, you can check out my Patreon. These videos take hundreds of hours to make, so any form of support is greatly, greatly appreciated. I do this because college prices have gotten wildly out of hand. I mean, everything is so expensive now, especially college. And that shouldn't be a reason why certain people don't get access to information. There's also tons of additional content that can help facilitate your learning. I add a list of questions associated with each module. I also have definition lists, and I answer a bunch of questions that anybody may have about the course itself. So if you like this video, definitely check it out.